Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Learning and Growing webinar, Failure Can Be an Option. Our presenter today is Shawanda Moore of Shelton State Community College. My name is Lauren, and I'm your moderator today for Hawks Learning. We'll have a live Q&A session, and Shawanda is happy to answer questions as we go throughout the presentation. So thanks so much for joining us, and I'll now hand it over to our presenter.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing well today. I'm going to try to see the chat as we go. All right. With that being said, my name is Shawanda Moore, as she said. I'm a math instructor and currently actually started as the Associate Dean of Academic Services at Shelton State. So I'm really excited about that. Just so I can make sure the chat is working, can everybody hear me? Yes, no, in the chat. All right. With that being said, let's get started because I know we're all fairly busy. So if you've ever heard me speak or do a presentation before, I give this disclaimer every time. I am not an expert. I do not claim to be an expert. I don't play one on TV. This is a conversation where I talk and I'll look at the stuff in the chat and I try to listen so we can all learn new things to help our students succeed. My goal in life is to always ensure that our students succeed and learn as much math or statistics as humanly possible. So with that being said, you need to know a little bit about me, right? I am somebody that's always loved numbers, somebody where math came easy, and I had to learn and to understand that students aren't like me. With that being said, what do I mean by students aren't like me? Not all of them like mathematics. I'm not sure if you have approached that at some point in your lives, but our students don't necessarily like mathematics. But I had to find some way to connect with my students. And so you will find that across my journey, I've taken little bits of what I've learned along the way and tried to incorporate them into the classroom. So hopefully everyone is there. I saw one hand up. I see hands, so I'm assuming that you can hear me. With that being said, you have to know who that little girl is. She comes from a place with a single parent and was not expected to do a whole lot. And so one of the things that I had to do was get a scholarship to be able to go to college, right? And so what was I good at? Biology was never my thing. I never enjoyed biology. I didn't like touching things. I didn't like cutting things, and I didn't like those creepy crawlies. So it didn't work for me. And I actually went to school for computer science. And the first time I had to run a program, and I'm going to date myself here, we didn't have computers in our room, and they had just gotten finished with punch cards and stuff like that. And I had to go to the lab and work on a program. And I worked on that program all night. And I could never get that program to work. I was miserably upset and miserably sad just to find out that I missed a comma. That's it. I missed a comma, and it destroyed my entire program. Hurt me to no end, right? So I expected to get an F on my program, but I got an 85, and it kind of shocked me that I got an 85. And I went to talk to my instructor, who was also the person that gave me my full scholarship. And one of the things he said was, you didn't master everything, but you started to understand. He said, I could see what you understood, and I could see you were making progress. And so part of what I'm going to talk about today is his approach and what I learned from his approach. So Thomas Edison says, I've not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And we often have students that come to class who have taken math maybe twice, maybe 3 times, or had a really bad experience before they ever get there. So if you've ever taught a developmental class, you know you see that more than any other times. But even when they take calculus or take differential equations, you start to see people who don't have the best experience with math. And so when we're teaching, we start with step number one and we work our way down to the final solution. And then if we do it right, we also check our work. Well, while we're doing this, when people have had a bad experience, we often get the question, why do I have to do this? Why do I need this? And so they tell you about their struggles, but do we ever teach them that struggle or that failure could actually be part of their success? And so what I want to do is show you how their struggle or their failure gives them little victories along the way, and how we approach that could change how they view the subject and the class. So if you go to the dictionary and try to define the word failure, they define failure as a lack of success. Right? They define it as a lack of success. Can everybody see the video or see the PowerPoint? I saw that in the chat. With that being said, if we're only defining stuff as a lack of success, if I never get anything right, I'm never going to get anything out of it. So can we change how we define it a little bit? Because technically success is defined as the attainment of a favorable outcome or a desired object or end. So maybe we can change it a little bit. So y'all are mostly math instructors, right? If not, you're going to do a little math today. So let's try something. This was a sample of a student's work. I gave them a problem. 12 minus 6 divided by 3. And they had to use the order of operations. Depending on where you are, they have the little acronym PEMDAS or GEMDAS, right? And this is what the student gave. Do you believe this student's attempt was a failure? Yes, no, maybe so. And it can be varied, right? Now, what do we think? And I see you bits and pieces of the responses. So think about it. If the goal was for them to understand, she's saying that chat is disabled on their end, so they can't actually type in the chat. So instead of the Q&A part, can you type in the chat? How about now? Still says chat is disabled. But I can actually see that y'all are told the chat is disabled. It works now. Yay, yay, life is good. Welcome to technology. So I want your opinions. Do you believe that this is a failure of an attempt? Yes, no, maybe so. If the goal is for them to understand the steps to order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, says it's okay. Depends on the grade level. No, because they attempted. Yes, according to the accepted agreements. Okay, so in this particular case, when called a failure, it's a missed attempt. I like that. I love how you said it. It was somewhat correct because they have memorized. They did memorize it, but there's still some issues here. So what's supposed to happen is that they're supposed to divide 6 and 3 first. So 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then 12 minus 2 is 10. So in this particular case, they didn't get the correct order of operations. They can perform the arithmetic stuff. They can say 12 minus 6. They can do 6 divided by 3. However, they missed out on really understanding order of operations. So in this particular example, the instructor actually did not give the student any partial credit. Would you be okay with that? Just think it through. No partial credit was given for this one at all. So that's number one. Let's try number 2. Ready? Let's try this one, because we all love a good linear equation, right? So 2x plus 7 is equal to 13. The student works through the problem. 2x, they subtract 7 from both sides. They did it horizontally instead of vertically. 2x is equal to 6 divided both sides by 2. And they gave me the answer is 4. Number one, can you identify what the student did? Do you know why the student did what they did? It's incorrect. The final answer is incorrect. Every step until the final answer is correct. They subtracted instead of dividing. And in their head, they may have been in division, right? They were in subtraction mode, and it does appear that the student subtracted instead of divided. Now, would you score that a 0? Partial success. So if this was a 4-point question, 2 or 3 would make more sense. Everybody okay with that? That 2 or 3 would make more sense? Yes, lots of partial credit. So if we would give it partial credit, the student can look at that as a partial success. Instead of saying, oh my goodness, I messed that up, I missed this problem, that's a win for someone who did not know how to solve an equation before we started. And somebody is correct. Under standards-based grading, that's actually a full credit kind of answer, if you've ever done any AP grading too, right? But think about that. The student understood what they were doing, and then they get to the final answer, and it doesn't make any sense to tell them that you're a failure, right? And since I've done math, y'all have to know that statistics is my baby. So we had to do a statistics example. We just can't leave that out. So here we go. Most graduate schools of business require applicants for admission to take the GMAT, right? Scores on the GMAT are roughly normally distributed with a mean of 527 and a standard deviation of 112. What is the probability of an individual scoring above 500 on the GMAT? If you've never taught a stats class, the student's work is correct until the very end. The student gets the proper Z value. Z is greater than negative 0.24. But if you know what that looks like on the normal curve, right? On the normal curve, you know that probability should be greater than 0.5. So what the student actually did was look up negative 0.24 on the Z table and found the probability of being less than a Z score of negative 0.24 instead of being greater than. Is this a 0? Anybody? Should we give a 0 for this answer? Less than half credit in your opinion? Okay. Partial. Okay. So definitely wouldn't give it full credit. They understood they needed a Z value. They got the correct Z value. They just used the table the wrong way. Everybody okay with that? And again, I took questions from actual instructors and actual tests, just so you can see what students do. And so since y'all jumped in really quickly, I know y'all are old pros at this. So maybe instead of talking about successes and failures, because we do put F's in the grade book, we do put A's, B's, C's, and D's. But as we go, maybe we should look at how we define those a little differently. So Desmond Tutu paraphrased this particular quote and says, there's only one way to eat an elephant, and that's a bite at a time. And again, I'm in the state of Alabama. Elephants are important in this state. I do not advocate eating elephants. However, one bite at a time. I don't and I won't understand something, all of it at one time. Nothing we do, we just pour it all in and we have it the first time, right? So if I'm having to do this a bite at a time to be able to properly digest what I'm doing, maybe I need to take the goals that I have as a student, help our students determine what their overall goal is for the class, which for most of them is what? Number one, I want to just pass. But then you have those really good ones that want an A. So here is your A, here's your C, whatever it is you're trying to get. And then what steps will I need to use or do in order to get to my final goal? So If a student has the desire to get to a level of C and they fail test number 1, that is not the end all be all of their existence. Full disclosure, went to school, told y'all I'm not a biology person. I graduated undergrad with magna cum laude. But one of the courses that gave me fits was biology. The very first test I took in biology, I made a 41. I had never seen that weird looking grade in my life, that F thingy. Never saw it, never seen it. And I was crushed. I called my grandma, and I remember this because my mom would call on Saturday mornings and wake me up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But I called my grandma and I told her, hey, Maria, I made an F on my test and I was miserable. She said, does that mean you failed the class? I said, no, ma'am. I just have to work a little harder to get the grade I wanted. And she said, okay, so what's the problem? And then promptly hung up on me. And in my head, I was distraught. But at the same time, I realized later in life that, okay, I can do this. I can get better at this. And I worked and I had to go study. And something I never had to do is go ask someone for help. And so sometimes the students don't know they need help. They just want to get what they get, but they don't know they need somebody to help them. So if we help them establish intermediate steps along the way, we can help them see how much progress they've made. They may have made an F on the first test, but look at your improvement from test 1 to test 2. And one way that I do this in my class is to give them journals. And it's not what you think. I know this is a math class, but a journal. How do I do that? I incorporate it as a reflective assignment. Make sense to everybody? So definitely want to do partial credit. And before I get to the reflectiveness, I have one-on-one conversations with my online students. Sometimes I have to set up individual Zooms that work with their schedules and my schedule. And we set up individual Zooms after the first test to say, okay, what's going on? Why did you fail test number 1? Is there something that you're missing? Did you watch the videos? You didn't come to the help sessions. Hey, let's figure out what's going on. I have those conversations so we can also diffuse the, oh my goodness, I'm not going to pass. I don't know why I even took this class conversation, and to catch them before they drop and they can't be saved. And so once we have those conversations, they have reflective assignments. And yes, even in a math course, you can have a reflective assignment. And so I typically ask, how did you do on test number 1, in your opinion? Was it what you expected? Do you think you can do something different to improve the grade next time? If not, are you satisfied with your grade, or have you decided that you can't do this? And then I walk through their journal entries and we go back and forth in the comments and we talk and say, okay, I see what you did, but maybe we can do X, Y, and Z. It's a wonderful thing to know that somebody is there to bounce that off of, but you've also broken their success up into little bitty steps. So, okay, you made a 41 on test 1 in your biology class, or a 41 in test 1 in your stats class or your math class. What can we do next time to get you to a 70? I do not give them unrealistic expectations. Okay, sometimes we expect students and they expect themselves to get to the very end of a class and make a 97 on the final when no grade was even close to that. So let's try to give them intermediary steps to get them to the 91 if that's what they're trying to do. So step 1, let's talk about it. We made a 41 on test number 1. Do you think we can work together to get you to a 70, right? And then, okay, we didn't quite get to a 70, we got to a 68. Oh my goodness, did you see the improvement between test 1 and test 2? Right? So let's give ourselves a higher goal. Let's give test 3 a grade of 80, right? Let's shoot for an 80. Let's see what happens. Oh, you didn't quite make the 80, you got a 74, but you're really close. Did you see the improvement? Okay, let's give ourselves 85 on the final exam and let's see what happens. You didn't get the 85, but you got an 80, but guess what you also did? You got a B or a C in a class where in the beginning you thought you made an F. And what we've done is change that initial failure to a stepping stone. And that becomes something that they've learned to work through. Because when we take away their ability to work through the failure, when they're faced with it again, they don't know how to process it. They don't know how to go through the steps. And with that, you have to understand that support is everything. And sometimes we don't quite understand the way support is. So again, I'm going to date myself a lot, and it's okay. There's this cartoon that I like to watch as an adult. I'm sorry, I like to watch cartoons as an adult. And in that cartoon, there are two mice. There's Pinky and there's the brain. Okay, Pinky and the brain. And if you've ever watched it, the theme song goes something like, they enter the episode and Pinky, the skinnier of the two, says, "Gee, Brain, what are we going to do tonight?" And Brain says the same thing we do every night, which is try to take over the world. And so when people look at that, they do the same thing every night, do the same thing every night. And so the theme song then keeps going and says, they're Pinky and the brain, Pinky and the brain. One is a genius, the other's insane. And so people assume the one with the bigger brain that has the plans to take over the world is the genius, right? They assume he's the genius. But if you've watched 4 years of episodes, which I have, diehard fan, if you've watched 4 years of episodes, you know that Pinky actually came closer to for having world domination. He had, in one episode, actually convinced world leaders to hand over power to him, right? So why do I tell the story? Students often think that the person that always makes hundreds on the test is the one that put in the most effort. And the ones that always get the A's are the ones that experience that happiness the most. But it is amazing what happens when you have a support system, because Brain has a support system every day that says, hey, I didn't take over the world tonight, but hey, I'm going to be with you every night until you reach your goal. And he gets really close. Each time he gets a little closer. And Brain has Pinky every time. So the first thing I tell students is that you need a support system. And it doesn't have to always be the most logical support system. It may not always be a parent. It may not always be a relative. Sometimes it might be the person in your class that's been rooting you on since the beginning, right? It might be the person that sits next to you. It might be your instructor. It might be the tutor that you work with in the tutoring system, in the tutoring center at your college or your school. Support is everything. Because if you have the right support, you literally think you can take over the world. But it also makes you resourceful, that when you have support, you find out that there are other resources out there and you use them. And every night you get a little closer. Even though you don't get to the end goal, it doesn't discourage you from not making it to where you intended, because you got a little closer, and that's enough to keep you going. And I don't know if anybody's been in a math class, but sometimes our students just need a little encouragement to keep going, right? To keep going, even when they don't hit their goals, right? And again, Pinky and the brain are just my thing, doesn't have to work for y'all. But having a support system is everything. And the funny part is that's not just for the students, that's for the instructors as well. If you've done this a long time, and this is year number 23 for me, for teaching college students, 23 years teaching college students, you need a support system in the building where you are. You need to be able to go sit in another math person or English person or biology person's chair to hear, okay, what are you doing in your classroom? How does that compare to what I'm doing in mine? Maybe I can take a little bit of what you do, you take a little bit of what I do, and we make things a little better. Because for our students to have checkpoints to get from point A to point B, we also have to continuously be improving and continuously assessing whether or not what we do is helping them. And what I did in 2001 or in 2000 may not work for students in 2023. When I was teaching hypothesis testing in 2010, I used O.J. Simpson when I was talking about type 1 and type 2 errors, right? My students now were not born yet when O.J. Simpson had his issues with his Bronco and whatnot, right? So I have to use entirely different things. When we're talking about comparisons, I have to use musical artists that they're not quite familiar with, right? And then they say, no, Ms. Moore, I have no idea who you're talking about. So I have to go learn something different. That doesn't change what I'm teaching. I've just altered how I'm teaching it to help them reach their intermediary goals. So again, support is everything. And even if you can't think of somebody now as an instructor, I think if you think about it really, really, really hard, there's somebody that you can connect with that will help out so much. So, are these the only solutions? Absolutely, positively not. So, I would love to hear what you think and your discourse in this particular matter. What ideas do you think students could use in order to find their minor successes within their failures? I don't, anybody, anything? Can you think of anything students could use to incorporate and to get over those small failures? Because I'm an interactive kind of girl. Any questions? Any comments? Didn't intend for this to be, let's see. Yes, I can definitely speak to how Hawks helps. So I teach statistics. Is everybody there with me? I teach statistics mainly through Hawks. Here's how we get through our small and intermediary steps. Hawks has a wonderful feature that as you're doing the certify mastery parts of it, if they get at least 80% correct, that's what I set mine to in my grade book. If they get at least 80% correct, at least 80%, the grade book records 100. Here is why students absolutely love this, because I ask students at the end of the semester and I listen to what they put in their comments. Number one, I don't feel like I've worked for nothing. So those 80s hurt. I don't know, sometimes you're like, oh, why would you give them? If they got 80% of the questions correct, or they start the process out and there are 10 questions, they got the first 8 correct, I give that system gives them credit and it builds their confidence, right? It builds their confidence. And then what happens? One of my students said, it kicked me out and told me to do something else. It didn't kick you out. It said, hey, maybe you want to practice a little bit more. It was being nice and said, hey, go practice a little bit more. So I send them back through the learn and then the practice. And then they go through the learn and the practice, and then they go back to the certify again to start those small victories. Because when they do the learn and the practice and they start to get it, it makes the homework go so much better. And so some people said, I frequently label some answers as not being wrong, but rather incomplete. So I love that answer. I love incomplete, because that doesn't mean that they didn't have some sort of understanding, but their understanding at the moment is incomplete. And again, when I tie in the homework, the Hawks, even with the quizzes, their understanding is incomplete. And so giving them credit for what they have learned that far just really helps along the way. They can use other students as references. I saw somebody say other students in class, face-to-face, even in the chats and in the discussions. If you've ever done this, and I've included Hawks assignments in the discussions, that have the students do an actual assignment and then discuss what they did well, what they didn't do well. And they actually talked among each other and told each other how they got through it. It's like, well, this is what I did and it worked for me. Oh, that's great. It kind of worked. Someone said when they grade, they tell students what they did correct first, then feedback on the error. I absolutely love that. One of my previous mentors called that the sandwich approach. Give me something positive, explain to me what I did wrong, and then give me something positive to close it. And it makes life so much easier. Circle only the incorrect piece and then ask students to try to explain what happened. That's true. The students can't really say 6 divided by 2 is 4. And if they can tell you what the mistake is, that's really, really good. It's like, oh my goodness, 6 divided by 2 is 3. I can't believe I did that. And it actually makes them feel better at the end. In my opinion, it makes them feel better. So, is there anything you would change about how you approach it in the process? How you would approach it teaching wise in the process to help students get to success? using their failures. I have some really good feedback. And if I take some of this, just understand that we're all teachers and we just do this. I didn't see any more in the chat. So if there are no other questions, I didn't intend for this to be a long session. It's a Friday afternoon and half of y'all have had a really long week. And so it has been my absolute pleasure to hang out with y'all this evening, and hopefully it wasn't a bore and hopefully y'all got something out of it. Oh, a welcome statement that says, oh, I love that. Do you put that in your online classroom? She says she has a welcome statement that says we all learn from mistakes. I do not use a red pen. I've become really partial to green and purple myself. Green is my favorite color. So yeah. Syllabus and D2L. I gotta try to, I need to start to do that. Put that in the beginning. But if y'all have no more, again, it has been my absolute pleasure to hang out with y'all for 30 minutes today. And I will turn it back over to Hawks Learning.
Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting, Shawanda, and for everyone for attending. We'll definitely be emailing over a link to view the recording. And I do appreciate everyone's patience as I was trying to figure out that chat and why it wasn't working. So thanks to everyone for joining us. If you or any of your fellow instructors might be interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series here at Hawks, please submit your proposal to our Learning and Growing website, and I'll link it in the chat now. And we are excited to offer different types of sessions for you. There we go. And we do bring our webinars to you for no charge from Hawks Learning. We're an innovative educational courseware company. And to learn more about exactly what Shawanda was talking about with our mastery-based course materials and how Hawks can enhance the learning outcomes for you and your students and encourage them to succeed and not feel like failures, then please visit www.hawkslearning.com. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, and thanks again for attending. Take care and have a nice weekend.